Hey y'all, hope you're doing good today. So I wanted to open by sharing this beautiful leaf. Isn't it awesome? So it's not from my yard, but you know that I love to go to parks, and so I actually found this at a local park and I just thought it was beautiful. And so apparently ginkgo trees have these beautiful leaves that are rich in symbolism. So everything I found so far online just says peace and all these good things. So if you're interested, you can look it up, but they're also a beautiful tree. So if you're looking for some updates to your landscaping, there's some inspiration for you. And if you want some inspiration for some snacks, this is my go-to. You guys know that I love Walgreens. They carry this. And I was thinking, you know, how funny it is with the marketing sometimes, you know, simple, honest, because you want your food to be honest, right? Well, I guess you really actually do with processed food today, right? And all the ingredients, delicious and nice. So important for your food to be nice. So, it's just kind of funny, but it truly is just a great snack. So that's my go-to every day, or most every day. But I hope you're doing good, and I hope you enjoy the message today. So you know, sometimes I wonder if you're like this too, if you journal, you know, or take notes as you research whatever it is. Sometimes it's kind of like I get some type of inspiration, and typically when my mind lands on a particular topic, and that's the one I go with, it's sort of like a process that unfolds, you know, as you're starting to write and you do some research, and you feel intuitively like, hey, let me look up this particular term, or you know, this event in history or concept or whatever that this really seems unrelated, but you have this intuitive idea to look it up, and then you look it up and then it's not unrelated, it actually ties in. It's really fun, right? But it's kind of like as these ideas evolve, you know, there's times when I just want to cut out the evolution part of the message and just get right to the meat of it, you know, the main points, and just go with that. But then it's sort of like, well, I feel like for me, when I, you know, have the time and want to watch a longer video, I appreciate the whole of it, you know, the evolution, because it's kind of like that serves as a good guide for my own mind to slowly work into a particular concept. You see what I'm saying? So I'm hoping that it's helpful for you in that same way. So in that spirit, I'm going to go ahead and just share with you the entirety of the evolution of this thought today. So my inspiration was simply a question, and that is, who are you? Who are you really? And you know, I watch a lot of different videos on YouTube, and there's been some recently that were discussing the false self with regards to psychology, that concept. You know, it's really fascinating. But before we get into that, let me go ahead and also share with you some concepts that will be you know, some really big points, talking points in the discussion, so you can decide if this message is interesting, or you feel like it's going to be interesting for you or not. So we're going to be talking about symbols and labels, the exploitation of language in general, and having the eyes to see that, and how this relates. Specifically, this is really the important part of it, how all this relates to keeping us separated from our power, and how if you have the time and the desire to do some digging, you know, some deep dives into this kind of research, it can serve as sort of like treasure hunting, you know. It can be very enjoyable at times, kind of shocking other times. But if you're bold enough to do it, to question things, right? To break things down and examine the you know, pieces and parts, it can absolutely be rewarding. And so I just encourage you to keep at it. You know, if you have that spirit explorer spirit, because I definitely think that from my own experience, you evolve, you wind up evolving yourself, right? And again, to tie back in this concept we've talked about a lot on my channel, which is that life force energy. It's meant to keep us in motion, right? It's the spirit of decay that comes from the darkness, right? Or the devil, if you're a spiritual person, that's meant to put a halt to any type of evolution. So evolution equates to change, right? It's part of growing as a person, okay? And a big part of that is learning, and even, I would say, unlearning, right? Really unlearning first. And I'll drop a Bible verse that relates to that down here, so that's coming to mind. But essentially, it's not my place. Going back to that question, who are you? It's not my place to tell you who you are, obviously, right? And I just hope that you keep that in your heart as you listen to other people who you may, respect their work and their concepts and everything that they present to you. Just make sure that you don't ever blindly follow another human being, that you always just take everything with a grain of salt and do your own processing to figure out on your own, right, the answer to that question. Okay, so that's just something that I want you to discover on your own. So but yeah, back to the concept of the false self. It's really fascinating. And I think about how, on one hand, it's associated in psychology with people who have sometimes very serious mental illnesses. But then on the other hand, we kind of normalize that concept too without realizing. See, this is just a great example of labels, right? So let's kind of keep that in mind. The label of the false self, right? Like I said, on one hand, in psychology, it's like, wow, that's a big deal. There's some serious problems here, with regards to somebody operating with that. But is that really so? How many people actually operate behind a mask? Because, and I'm going to illustrate that in this very common phrase, which is fake it till you make it. So it's just really interesting to me to just break things down to that level and question things, and essentially to come to the understanding of the falsehoods and the errors with regards to labels, because it's like they serve as these umbrella terms that are actually like this confining like dome. It's constricting and it limits our thinking in that way. Does that make sense? And so and I just want to clarify, I don't believe myself to be operating from behind a mask, but I just think that just collectively, we generalize labels as concepts, and I think that sometimes that creates division and arguments and confusion, and that's the point that I want to illustrate here. It's not about using these terms to start to self-judge or evaluate or to judge others. It's not about that. I just want to illustrate the point here, with regards to what happens when we operate in our minds from a position of using these restrictive concepts like umbrella terms. Okay, so I think we are all born from love, right? And as we navigate this life as love, or from the spirit of love, which was given to us by our Creator, right? If you are a spiritual person and have that belief, then there comes a point where we're faced with evil at some point. Okay, and the psyche is really incredible. The human mind, the way it works, it does all these tricks and backflips and all this stuff to protect itself, and all of this happens automatically. It's instinctive, and when I say automatically, I mean that it can even bypass our conscious mind. So it doesn't even register that sometimes that, there's been this shift in our mind to protect itself. But it's just incredible to understand the mechanics, even just a tiny portion, to understand a tiny portion of the mechanics of the human mind is incredible, and how it regulates everything, right? To remain stable in its attempts to remain stable at all times. Even to the point of relegating our experiences to, like our really traumatic experiences, to the deep recesses of our mind. That's how people can go through a really just incredibly horrible trauma and not even remember it. It's just really incredible, right? And so I propose that maybe the more pain one suffers, the more the person associates love with pain, almost like consciously or unconsciously. They become synonymous in this person's mind, which then kind of explains the concept of the avoidant personality disorder, right? But on the extreme end of it, okay? Like someone who literally avoids connecting with people on a deep level because they associate love with pain, right? They're fearful. That's, again, operating instead of from love. If you think of love on this spectrum as, having the opposite being fear, it's like operating from that fearful side, you see. So, it all ties into even the hero's journey, which we talk about a lot on my channel, which is the recovery of self. If you aren't a spiritual person, you may think of it that way. If you are a spiritual person, it would be the recovery of one's spiritual heritage or finding God, right? So in all of these concepts lies a common theme, and that theme is that something is or was missing. Okay? Something big. And of course, the hero's journey is all about retrieving that. Okay, so let me share with you Romans chapter 1, verse 20. It says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made." Now remember, these are invisible qualities, but yet it says, have been clearly seen, right? Because it defines his invisible qualities as being eternal power and divine nature. Okay. Since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, right? From the result. So we're looking at the result. We're being told to look at the result to, like, as a clue, to draw a line to the origin, see, as proof of the origin. This is like teaching us how to put two and two together here. You see what I'm saying? How to put the puzzle pieces together. Really interesting. So that's going to be a big part of our message. It says, so that people are without excuse. In other words, I feel like this verse is saying, with regards to proof of God or a creator, it's like you can't miss it. You see what I'm saying? So, really interesting. All right, so in psychological abuse, when your mind has been messed with, right? I've come to theorize, this is just me, that it's from two different motives. Number one, purposefully. Okay, to exploit you in some way, to distract you from finding out about something unethical, maybe like if the person's living a double life, to try and destroy you in some way so that the person can come out looking a certain way, like a victim or better than you or whatever it is, right? Specifically to friends and family or the community, or maybe even for the purpose of cashing out on you. Okay, so there's one possibility, okay, as far as being a motive for psychological abuse. Number two, another theory, which would also be purposefully done. See, they're both on purpose, conscious, okay, done consciously. But the motive in the second theory I have would be to deflect any and all of your attempts at trying to connect on a personal level with that person, okay? In other words, they're so walled up because, again, going back to what we talked about earlier with pain being associated with love, right? These people are so walled up that they are just deflecting any and all of your attempts at connecting with them on a personal level, which again is like the avoidant personality disorder, but to the extreme. So, you know, I think that that's an important distinction here. I mean, in both cases, there's essentially like this false self, this mask with these people. But in the first concept or motive, it would be kind of related to a double life, somebody having a double life, right? And possibly very bad intentions for you, okay? But the second example or concept would be that the true self, their true self is so wounded that any additional love would be too risky, right? Because again, love is equated to pain for these people. Now, it's interesting to note here that, you know, in the Bible, God is synonymous with love, okay? And again, the hero's journey is a return to God or a return to love, okay? So, you know, we all have our own ways of discerning a person's true character, a person's true motives, you know, who they really are, which, you know, when we rope logic into this, it takes a while, you know, to make sense of things, because as far as logic goes, you're incorporating language now, see, and you're having to process thoughts that are constructed of words and therefore concepts. So there's that piece, but then there's this numinous aspect, right? This discernment within us that is also at work. And yes, it can be done through logic, but there's also an aspect that doesn't have to be processed through logic. There's an aspect that's almost instinctive and intuitive. That to me is the numinous aspect, right? So that's important. So we all have our own ways. And I just, you know, I want to share here with you the saying that, you know, the eyes are the windows to the soul. I think that's very relevant here. I think that if you are keeping in mind that, you know, love and God are synonymous, and you think about light, the concept spiritually of, you know, darkness and light, I believe when, you know, we think of that phrase that the windows or the eyes are the windows to the soul, I think there's some credibility to that. You know, I think that you can see the light in some people, and in others, like I mentioned in my last video, I think, you know, there's a deadness there in their eyes. Everything else seems the same. They can be very charming and, you know, just have this charisma and engage with you intellectually and all this stuff. But there's this deadness in their eyes. It's really interesting, okay? So, you know, you might just conceptualize that if you see the spark inside of the eyes, you know, maybe that's an indication of light, the light inside, right? Part of that divine fire, or love, true love and realness inside of that person. See, because what we're looking for is, we're like Little Red Riding Hood, you know, and we're just looking to see, you know, is that really a sheep, or is it a wolf in the sheep's clothing, in costume? You know, who are we dealing with here? A real person, a true person, or an actor? That's what we're looking to do, okay? So, you know, when you consider the concept of God being synonymous with love, if you think about the opposite of God, you know, again, we can think of it as being fear, but let's just kind of put that to the side for a minute. Think about the power of God. I mean, omnipotent, okay? The power of God, and therefore the power of love All right? If you try to consider the opposite of that with regards to power, it's not simple because it's so powerful, right? So I feel like it would require multiple opposite concepts, okay? Multiple. Because it's so powerful that it's really so encompassing, okay? But if you do consider multiple opposite concepts like fear and greed and, all those kind of things, right? The negative, low vibrational energies and intentions and stuff like that, if those are all kind of collectively the opposite of love, then their power all falls short in equating to an opposition equal in force to love. Okay? Now this is interesting. Let me give you a real life example, just a simple example here. So if you look at the evolution of language, it's so incredible. It's, the ancient alphabets, each letter was a symbol that meant something, You could look at the one letter and that in itself was all-encompassing. It was powerful. Each letter was powerful. And then look at how language has evolved and how complicated it has become. It's just something to think about, right? Like why and the motives and all this stuff, just something to think about. But, love is so powerful. It's so abundant. Okay? Again, think about it as being synonymous with God and God being the Alpha and Omega. Okay? So, really, what even is pain? Since we were talking about that earlier, except love expressed as a loss in some way. Okay? So love is essentially forevermore. If God cannot be created or destroyed, love cannot be created or destroyed. Okay? Basically anything perceived as an opposition to it is a lie or a falsehood. See? So it's like everything is really only in reality just another layer that masks love. Just, layers of junk, of falsehood, right? Masking it. So I'm reminded of one of Bob Marley's songs, which I've always loved, Could You Be Loved, right? And he says, only the fittest of the fittest shall survive. Stay alive, right? So Matthew chapter 7 verse 21 says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Right? What is that will? What is the number one commandment? Okay? It's to love your neighbor as yourself. Love. Okay? And remember the verse also that says that we must change and become as little children again to enter the kingdom of heaven. All right? So, what does this mean? This means that we have to wash away our defenses. We have to strip down, I'm thinking about fig leaves. We have to strip down to our true self, our core, which is love, right? So it's like what we're dealing with here, just collectively, just humanity in general, okay? And then some people too, individually, maybe even you at some point in your life or whatever. But essentially what we're dealing with is the snowball effect, okay, of just layers and layers of pain and complication and confusion, and this has to be confronted and dealt with. All right, it's the only way. So, who are you truly, right? I propose that you are a spark from the greatest fire of all. You are love, which is synonymous with being a part of God, which is also meaning that you're a part of that power, see? So if we can just take on this challenge and wrap our head around it, it's a very freeing feeling, right? And more than it being a feeling, I think there's power to it, to doing this work, okay? So there's a that I would call unconscious conditioning, okay, that we're about to get into more with regards to language and stuff like that. And the issue is that it carries on through subtle control, right? Generation after generation, and it's able to do this. It's successful because it's invisible to us, right? It's there, but we can't see it. All right, so yeah. So I've shared with y'all in past videos how there's many words where when you look up the etymology, their meanings have changed and morphed literally into their opposites over time. Is so interesting. So I feel like there's this force of deception, which the Bible talks about, right? With regards to this realm, this earthly material realm, you know, and who runs it. That the darkness is in control, right? The spirit of the devil is in control. So what's that all about? You know, thinking about the Garden of Eden, it's deception. It's the lie. And so that's the force that we're struggling with, right, at work. And I believe it's specifically, its motive is specifically to disconnect us from or create forgetfulness of our past. Okay, so have you ever wondered why humanity seems to progress in every area except for unity and compassion, right? And love? Why is that? Why are we still barbaric with regards to that, you know? So it almost seems like this should be a clue. Like, again, looking at the evidence to draw the line back to the origin, to the truth, because we have to do that to get through those layers, okay, of falsehood that we're swimming in day in and day out. So it's almost like the fact that we can progress in every area except unity and compassion. That in itself, we ought to see this as a clue. Like, there's this omission here. So if we flip it, then we can see the force at work. Because again, if God equals love, and love is the one thing that we can't seem to get right collectively, then it's like God is the main target of this force at work, this darkness. So, you know, if you think about, I'm just going to bring in another simple example. If you think about something as simple as little kids learning their colors, their primary colors, secondary colors, you know, warm colors, cool colors, you know, think about, for example, cool colors, you know, like green and blue. And I know that particular shades can be warm or cool, but specifically just take blue for example, right? So we're taught that blue is a cool color, and yet blue is the hottest flame color there is. The hottest fire is blue, see? So, like I said, it's like we're swimming in contradiction. Our minds are swimming in it, which is exactly what you've experienced personally if you've ever been entangled with a psychopath or sociopath, narcissist, a toxic person with bad intentions. Someone who psychologically abused you. Same thing. Okay? So check this out. Again, labels. I view them as limiting thought structures, or I guess confines. I'm thinking of that word. Something that confines you, restricts you. And it feels like, if you think about their purpose, the purpose of labels and how they operate, I draw the conclusion that they are assisting this malevolent force working against God and love and truth. So if we personify this concept of Jesus saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me, right? Okay, we're personifying Jesus with regards, you know, for learning purposes, with through the lens of what he said about himself here, okay? So Jesus is all about surrendering, the laying down of something, okay? So one way to look at this is that, if you're operating in the mud and you've been just living a life swimming in this falsehood and operating in it and with it out of ignorance, right? The lies, then laying that down would be an intentional move that you make, this surrender, right? This bold decision to lay it down, with the reward being this reconciliation with God, right? This peace that enters your heart, your spirit, this love. That's one way to look at it, okay? But another way to look at it, there's something else you might consider, which I'm not saying it has to be either or, it could be both and. But if you have an interest in digging for symbolism, Luke chapter 22 verses 66 through 71 are kind of discussing who Jesus is. Remember, our topic is who are you, right? So this is like verses who define Jesus. And there's possibly a pivotal moment specifically in verse 69, okay, where this is where, I've mentioned before, oddities. Look for things that are out of place, specifically as a clue. And so he gets very specific with talking about being at the right hand of God. It's very interesting here. It's like, why would he specify that? So if you just like to dig, I just wanted to share that with you because I found it and it just kind of registered for me. But I was also looking up the etymology of the term label. And, in the 13th century, the modern French word was lambeau, Lembeau, which means a string, a rag, a shred, or a tatter, right? So that just perfectly illustrates how I view labels at work in our lives, right? A label is only part of the story, and how many people have gotten into just huge heated arguments over that, and it's just a matter of I think you just call it semantics, or it's just a matter of just expanding to find where you both actually agree, but you're just stuck, zoomed so far in on this one point, because there's this hot phrase or label, see, this umbrella term that is riddled with error because there's no room for gray area. So important, right? And a big part of what keeps us divided. So, Matthew chapter 6, verse 6 is where it's talking about, not casting your pearls before the swine. And then the Geneva Bible translates the end of that verse with, lest they turn and rent. And then the King James Version says rend you. So I looked up rent, which is a noun, and one definition is the torn place, right? And the newer versions of that Bible verse say, lest they turn and tear you to pieces, right? But essentially there's a brokenness. So if wisdom is the principal thing, which we are told it is, it stands to reason that through evidence available to us, that there is a force at work that creates what? Not only division, but also a fragmentation, a brokenness, just not only amongst ourselves, but within each of our own minds, see? Because our wisdom is trapped in language that has been twisted and exploited. That's why connecting with our intuition is so important, because it bypasses that, So the fragmentation itself, looking at the evidence itself, remember, to find the origin. Where there's smoke, there's fire. There's another example. This fragmentation itself is evidence of the spiritual war, okay? To keep us from knowing our true power collectively as, if you're a Christian, you would say, as the body of Christ, okay? Which it's said that Christ will come again. He will return. Okay, so I love that there's this uprising of the spirit of love in those who have its mark in their hearts. Okay, the signature of love. And there's this uprising of this creativity, because that is part of who we are as a spark of the Creator, that we are creators too. And so truth is being expressed creatively, but you have to have the eyes to see it. So, I'm just reminded of all the different myths and fairy tales and stories and folklore that tell us to remember who you are. See? So, essentially, our work is to shovel off all the layers and layers of deception, right? And piece together all the fragments to see the bigger picture. So, when you find yourself entangled with a person with bad intentions, it's like, I feel like you're essentially chosen or nominated. You've been picked for this work, right? Because the darkness affects us in that way. So, who can fight the wolves in sheep's clothing except the sheep that can see the wolves? So Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12 says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and rulers of the darkness of this world, right? Against spiritual wickedness in high places. So looking up the word principality, it equates to sovereignty or supreme power or authority, right? Which also, another definition is primitive, right? So it's just like an origin, a spiritual origin, a place of spiritual origin, I would say. Supreme power or authority. So Luke chapter 10 verse 19 says, behold, I give you power or authority to trample snakes and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. So we hold the true authority. Those with love in their hearts hold the true authority, see. So, in the end, I believe that labels are the result of exploiting language through twisting and reworking, with results being that it keeps us confused and separated from wisdom. All right? Again, it's amazingly intriguing to look at and compare ancient languages, right, to what we operate with today. Just an incredible difference, okay? So, if we consider the oldest use of, this is really interesting, and we're going to wrap up, but if we consider the oldest use of label, it was said in the Online Etymology Dictionary that it is as a technical term in heraldry. Now, heraldry is when knights began to create combinations of colors, shapes, and animals to put on their armor, right? Essentially, symbolism or labels. It's labeling, same thing, right? So they would have, because they would be in their armor, their helmets would cover their face, and so it was a way to be identified, okay? Be thinking about the concept of wolves in sheep's clothing. All right, just the concept. So this was called their arms, okay? So heraldry was all about showing people who you are. Now, this was a conscious action that they took, right? Anything that is a conscious action within a person is something that can be replicated and exploited by the enemy. All right? So, yes, this is really interesting. I just put a side note here. Our ancestors took precautions with their armor to protect themselves, yet displayed their coat of arms, right? Which was directly related, this heraldry, symbolism, coat of arms, was directly related to their rank and family lineage, right? And I'm sure many knights were very honest and straightforward with it, but I'm just talking about conceptually symbolism and labels, right? Anything that exists, that's meant for good, can be used and exploited when it's something that's done consciously. Okay? So when your lineage is love, I just want to encourage you with this, okay? You bear that coat of arms automatically, unconsciously even, see? And because of that, your clan or your tribe will recognize you. And because it's an automatic thing, okay, and it's even unconscious, you never have to defend your position with others who bear that same coat of arms, see? You don't have to prove anything. So just rest in that. Let that bring you peace. Now, so the world wants us to get into the snare of labeling ourselves, right? Which creates division, which is kind of like the substance of what proof is made of, okay? But see, love unites. Love is that force that unites us all. So I believe in the end that we are encouraged to participate in using symbolism and labels, because this enables those with the spirit of darkness to hide behind them. So it's essentially two different ways of operating, to be in the world but not of the world. So I just encourage you to think on these things and see if anything arises for you, if you're able to put some puzzle pieces together. And I just hope that it brings you ultimately peace, maybe some aha moments, and that you're able to connect some dots. And I just thank you so much for coming along to hear the message today. I hope I got the wheels turning for you, and I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.